Yes, we are. Just
We
waiting on
are
the
live. Cool.
Instagram.
And let me know when you get the live indicator from Instagram. I do not have mine yet. There it is. All right. So I'll go ahead and do the intro. Hi, everybody who is watching the replay, or if you are joining us as I speak. This is Ask Me Astros, a weekly coffee chat talking about relevant transits, typically within the week, or things that are coming up that are interesting and just how they actually relate in a tangible and applicable way to our lives. You can ask general astrology questions here, but if you've got personal questions for you and your actual natal chart, that is best left for askmeastros.com, where you can submit your question about your natal chart, which we may include in a future live episode. It'll be anonymous, speaking of, and you will get an opportunity to have a free reading with each of us. And speaking of each of us, hi, I am KristaLyn and Sofia, and this is Vivi Henriette. Vivi, how are you doing?
I'm doing good this morning. I'm tired. Um I'm alarmed by my camera is so close, but we'll deal with this.
I saw a swap there for a second. That was fun.
I swapped. Okay, I'm going to deviate for, astrology for a moment, but like I'm always impressed by your just stable camera setup. Like it's perfect every time.
It is my computer. It's only my computer camera. I just made sure that when I got one, it was a very good Zoom computer, which seems to do a pretty good job. Because this is
Nice.
what, like, my whole setup is: 2 monitors, a microphone, and my lovely bookshelf, which makes everything look better all
I
the
love
time.
it. I have this sort of fancy camera that I always zoom in too much. I'm just like, okay,
Yeah.
just gonna stare at me.
Yeah, I've got a ring light behind me that's like on its own tripod. I
Yeah.
really like that. One day I might get fancy enough to have another camera, but that would make my whole office look very busy, and I don't
Yeah.
know if I could handle that.
I will give a voice to the fact that we've been doing this, I don't know, like a long time at this point.
Mm,
It
it's like a
feels
year and
much
a half.
longer. Huh?
It's like a year and a half at least.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've moved, and I love that just like your background hasn't changed. Like
Yeah.
I had been to your previous house, and so whenever I look at you, I think of that house, but of course it's not. It's a different house entirely.
No, it's much more cottage core in this room, which makes me very happy. But we did move house in about November, but these are bookshelves from Costco, so they came with us. I got a really good Costco sale. And Sarah, hi Sarah, I am burning your candle. The candle you made me is still going, and I am burning it right now in lieu of incense. Since I'm a little low, I always burn
Yeah.
Sarah's candles. She makes incredible candles. And what computer I have is a Microsoft Surface. It's like a Surface Studio. It's the laptop that actually the screen can bend out and create more of like an easel situation.
Oh,
So it is a Microsoft Surface laptop. And the top, it can fold out to be like a tablet, and it comes with a pen. And that always makes me really happy because I can annotate PDFs from my computer.
you're the person I know who oh, like I think it was in a matter of like 2 hours that you switched from like everything Mac
Yep.
to like PC.
Yep, I
Like,
did do that from Athens.
wow.
Yeah, I was in Athens and I was like, you know what? I'm done with the Apple ecosystem. This is where autism meets ADHD. So
Yeah.
I was done with the Apple ecosystem. My loyalty was gone. And so in a matter of 2 hours, I had ordered a new phone, a new computer, like all the things that you need to replace in order to get out of the Apple ecosystem. I had ordered all of it for less than the cost of a single computer. And it would be at my house a couple days after I arrived home from Athens. So I wouldn't have to live in that life anymore when I got home.
Wow. And then the question is, what was wrong with the Apple ecosystem for you personally in that moment?
It was too, so the Apple is really, really, really cool if you remain loyal to Apple. If you want to
Yeah.
work and play nice with other people, you can't.
Okay.
And I wanted to work and play nice with other people. And I like the bells and whistles of like having a phone that can do more than just be a phone. Like this one can fit in my pocket and it's awesome. And I can have multiple phones with settings that I can accommodate myself with.
I mean, was there an incident in Athens that really set you off?
My friend and business partner had the latest Note, which came with a stylus. And I was like, man, I miss being able to do fancy things with my phone. So I decided to just let myself.
Okay, so they were out of the Apple ecosystem and
Yeah.
you were like, "I'm gonna join forces."
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Also better camera. I have a triptych on my wall of a storm cell that I took with a Samsung Note 8. So like
Yeah.
years and years ago, 2018. And it is still one of the crispest photos that we have. The professionals with their professional camera were jealous of that shot. Now, I'm not a very great photographer. I don't have an amazing eye, but I did have a great shot that day. And the camera did the rest of the work. So credit where it's due.
Wow.
Yeah.
With that, should we talk speaking of new things, should we talk about the new moon?
Let's talk about the new moon. Let's talk about a little bit higher up in the sky than the storm clouds. Um, if we ever need a segue, I've got it. Um,
That might be put me on a future tangent for, cloud seeding, but we can pin
oh
that.
yeah. Well, last night Dan and I were having a really good time with the storms around here because we were just like noticing all the things we noticed on our storm chase, and it was really fun to relive that a little bit. He is actually an educated meteorologist, so he knows what he's talking about. I was very much the like I just got back from Europe kind of person. I went on a storm chase once, and I know what spin is, kind of thing. But it was fun for us to relate. As far as the new moon this week, it's a little bit, when I did my video for YouTube this week, I really wanted to be like, it's the new moon. She's in her domicile. Venus is nearby. Like Saturn is there, but trine. Mars is there, detriment and stuff, but sextile. And like, this shows that whole, like, if you ever wanted your signature manifesting moon, it would be this one. It is not this one. It is not.
Can we
Uh,
share the screen?
yeah, sure. So
You're like, "Nope, going to
I
burst your
wish.
bubble." And
I wish, right? I want to be the bearer of good news. And I want to, support people in their desires for opportunities to create the lives that they want. You can do those things, but we do have certain astro weather to accommodate, right? Just like you sometimes need a raincoat to have a good day in
yeah.
nature. Sometimes we need to accommodate the circumstances of the astrology as well. So when we get into what we're dealing with this new moon. Let me make this a little less busy. So we have the new moon in Cancer, right in the middle of Cancer, entering into that halfway 15th degree situation. What we want to look at is what is the moon most recently separating from by degree and what is she applying to? And then I looked at valence to see like is the bend of the nodes, which is what this situation is called, and
Yeah.
I'll explain it in a second. Is it a big deal? And Valence seems to think it is. I was kind of impressed that Valence invoked like don't test God basically in this situation. So the bend of the nodes is quite literally the bend, kind of like an elbow here between
Yeah.
the north and south nodes. So the moon and the sun are there. The moon's going to hit the bend of the nodes every month because the moon goes around every month, but the
Yeah.
sun has joined the moon this time. So this new moon occurs at the bend of the nodes, and we can see the last aspect the moon had was the square with the nodes, and the next one the moon will have is not this conjunction with Venus, but it's going to be Saturn. And then even after that, right after that, it'll be Mars. So the malefics get a say before Venus can come in to say anything about it. So that
So what
is
we're dealing with here
important.
from understanding oh, sorry,
Yeah. No,
is
I'm wrapping that up. Go ahead.
we're dealing with the new moon at the bend of the nodes because we see it's in 4 degrees. So
Mhm.
that is something. And then just maybe that aside or in addition to, we're going to say that this manifesting new moon is a little rough because the moon is going to hit both malefics before it hits that like really lovely Venus.
Yeah.
So, manifestation with some rocky spots.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to manifest like overcoming obstacles and challenges, resting up in preparation for your training montage,
Yeah.
it sounds like a great idea. In many, including Valens, but also I think Dorotheus, when they talk about starting something new or beginning something, which typically
Yeah.
is what we would think about on your spiritual new moon, is beginning something, starting something new, manifesting something. And so from here, we say, is this actually a good time to be starting something? The answer, unfortunately, is no. And if I may read a small passage from Valens to
Yeah.
explain why in traditional astrology, they don't talk much about the nodes, but when they do, this is what we get. So in Valens Anthology, book 5, Valens says a couple sentences here. First, if one finds someone beginning some matter while the moon is passing through the ecliptic places, and that is the bending of the nodes, because when the moon is at this position, she is going from north to south on that ecliptic. So she's doing her little, we've all seen the pictures of the moon doing that sort of infinity symbol. She's making that cross at the bends of the nodes. So if one finds someone beginning some matter while the moon is passing through the ecliptic places, he can forecast that the matter will be incomplete, regretted, and subject to penalties. And then further, indications of the intensity of the danger will occur when the moon transits the same places, the ascending or descending node. So again, danger transiting the ascending and descending node anytime the moon transits them is conjunction. So we don't want the moon in conjunction or square to the nodes when we begin something new. Then we think, but Venus is there. Venus should be helping us out here, right? I mean, it's daytime, so she's not the benefic of sect, but she is present. That should help. And what we get in that is, even if a benefic is able to do something, a malefic in conjunction or aspect will hinder the good. So we do see that even though Venus is there, able to do something, the fact that before Venus gets her say, we hit both Mars and Saturn just shows that if we begin something right now, that regrettable outcome is probably going to be the first thing we notice.
Well, what can people do for in your thoughts that maybe so this isn't the moon to intentionally begin something, but like, I don't know, are there like, what are other ways that you might work with this new moon, right? It's not an eclipse, it's a new moon.
So I did actually go into this. Valens continues on this as well. There's a longer passage here that I shared with my Patreon this week that I'm happy to share here too, because Valens gets a little bit spiritual on this side. And I want to specify that when God is mentioned in this case, we're talking God Theos, as in divinity, the creator mind, the universe, not God as in necessarily the Abrahamic God. So keeping that in mind for anybody who's interested in that. So in the next passage, Valens says, since the previously mentioned place, the ecliptic place, the bending of the nodes, is powerful, I offer this advice to my readers, not with the idea that it is possible to appeal to the decrees of fate and to act according to one's wishes. So not that you're going to manifest, but with the suggestion that it is possible, I would certainly claim it to be, he puts in parentheses, for the initiates of this art to weaken the evil to some extent. Valens says that for God, in his desire that man should foreknow the future, brought this science into the world, a science through which anyone can know his fate in order to bear the good with great contentment and the bad with great steadfastness. So he goes into more here, but he's basically saying, you know what's coming. Because now we have all of this stuff to say, maybe we don't start something right now. We bear the bad with steadfastness and embrace the good with contentment. Look around in your life for what is already good and be consciously content for what is already good. The moon in Cancer is a very nourishing, restful, kind of rejuvenating, kind of community-based energy anyway.
Yeah.
So look around for the people and the support system that you already have, rather than trying to find something that you feel like you need. And maybe you'll find resources already there for you that can support you and help you have a firmer foundation to build upon for things that are coming up, instead of looking for something brand new.
I love that. And I love it too. I love we've come in with the Valens, which is always a little scary to me. And then it brings something positive. Did Valens, I was reading something, and I was reading a lot of things this weekend. Did Valens eventually convert to Christianity, or am I thinking of somebody else?
I think Valens was a staunch Stoic through and through, actually.
Okay.
I know Demetra mentioned that in Denver a couple weeks ago, that Valens was a Stoic. I think Maternus is the one who eventually
You're right.
Christian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry. You're right. Because I was reading two things, and this is what I was reading. That's where it came from.
Yeah. There it is. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm proud of myself for knowing that.
I'm proud of you for knowing that. I'm proud of me for having anything close to a reference.
Thank you for bringing it up, though. It's so good. Again, one of the big topics that always comes up and that always blew my mind is keeping in mind the worldview and the philosophy of the person who's writing. And that's true for any translation. That's true for any lesson or any teaching. And it's just always good to keep in mind, like Valens was a Stoic. So he was saying, bear the good with contentment, bear the bad with steadfastness. That's a very Stoic way to look at things. And in astrology, a lot of people find they at least go through a Stoic phase.
Yeah, and with this particular delineation, we are reading about because the new moon was at the bendings, correct?
Yep.
And then there's also the malefic stuff we spoke about earlier,
Mhm.
which he mentioned as well. But I thought it was interesting bringing up Demetra.
Mhm.
I think the one thing, this was more of like a Norwalk. I love that Demetra's still like, I don't know how the nodes work. I don't know how the nodes work, and
Yeah.
I'm wondering your thoughts about that. So we're referencing Valence for the nodes, but like, I don't
Yeah.
know. Like, do you always agree with his delineations, or what are your thoughts?
Well, he doesn't delineate the nodes. He just says beware of them, which is
Mm,
interesting to me, right? So you get later, some people will say the north node is malefic or is benefic and increases and all of those things.
yeah,
The south node is malefic and decreases. And those, if I remember right, and it does make sense for what I do know, those are terms that are borrowed from Vedic astrology. And in Vedic astrology, if I recall correctly, the nodes are considered a sort of malefic influence no matter what. Demetra also in her book makes the argument that if we're going to interpret planets on nodes and at bends of nodes, we have to make sure that we also consider every planet does have nodes. We pay attention to the lunar nodes because they show us eclipses. But
yeah,
you can calculate nodes for every planet, and some do. Some astrologers do go that far, and so it bears to ponder. How far are you going to go with it if you decide to go into nodes being that crucial outside of just we're halfway between eclipses as we are when the sun and the moon are at the bends of the nodes, and we're at the eclipses as we are when the sun and the moon are both on the nodes.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah,
So I tend to when something's close to it, I'll say, north node, there's probably going to be an increase of something. South node, there potentially could be a decrease of something. But that is definitely an interpretation that I am very malleable with. I'm open to learning more.
yeah, same. It's interesting. I think I don't know. I feel maybe it's very appropriate, but I think all of my understanding of the nodes comes from teachers who've been in the Vedic tradition. I do like, yeah, and you're right. There's more of a malefic quality to the nodes. I think the north
Mhm.
node maybe more so.
Yeah, I think so. One of the ways I like to interpret it, and it's because I try to be an optimist, but it's to me, the malefic quality is the indifference of the nodes. They're going to do something that we may really be excited about and may align with our goals, or they're going to do something that may not align with our goals, but they're not caring about our goals. And so, really, it's the maleficness is the impartialness of them, the fact that they don't seem to have the heart to care about humanity. As a benefic, people often associate Jupiter as being like it's always going to be good stuff, and we know that there is some gray area to that. But with the nodes, it's like it is going to be what it is going to be, and if you're in line
Mhm.
with that, fantastic. And if you're not, you might find that you're rebuilding some stuff.
I like that. I started watching s someone shared, actually in Larry's student group, um, a Freedom Cole video or lecture when he's talking about the nodes. And this one was particularly interesting because he was recording it like short in 2017, so after the 2016 elections.
Mm,
And he was going through talking about like the eclipse path in relation to politics, but like
yeah.
going through world history and tracing the path of the like different eclipses and correlating them to like these big movements in history. And I think so far, like what I'm understanding is that this idea he's putting forth this idea that where eclipses are visible, which is where the path of totality is for an eclipse, is
Mhm.
where we're going to get upheaval like and like sudden disruptions and thus causing like major changes in history. So also typically the nodes were used more in world astrology than they were in personal charts. So I think the personal thing might be a more of a more recentish development.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even Valens, who speaks mostly on natal, is talking about inceptions in this passage regarding the nodes. Like he goes
Yeah.
into, if you're going to plan something, suddenly that's not natal anymore, right? So that is more electional astrology, really.
Yeah.
And they are more, the only time I've heard of the nodes being important is when someone is born on an eclipse.
Yeah.
And then ancient astrologers will say this person is probably going to have some kind of eminence or importantness to them, as we find a lot of world leaders do have. Not everyone who is born on an eclipse becomes a world leader, but there is a certain intensity and sense of direct purpose that they seem to be compelled toward. But again, totally open to further study.
Yeah. Me too, obviously. Um, should we talk? I'm so curious because we're talking about this. I've thought a lot about the full moons in Capricorn because they're with, I just had a conversation with my friend Vivian. We were talking about the fact that in the full moon we just had in Capricorn, Saturn's direct, and then this month we get 2 full moons in Capricorn, and the second one, Saturn's retrograde. And I'm still putting my head around what Saturn retrograde means. I know it can mean reversals, takebacks, things like this, but I also know it's
Mhm.
not as profound as maybe Mercury
Yeah.
retrograde. So I'd love your thoughts on these 2 lunations.
Yeah. So, I mean, one is direct and one is retrograde, as you
Yeah.
mentioned. So to me, it's like since we're getting two of them, whatever happened in the first one, we're going to revisit in the second one. You know,
Mhm.
it's a theme you're going to revisit either way because it's also Capricorn, but also because Saturn has now turned back and is, kind of walking backwards. So to me, whatever culminated
Yeah.
around the period of the Capricorn full moon, which is something that may have begun back in December-ish around the Capricorn new moon, that
Mm.
theme will still be something you're playing around with and that you bring the most closure to, or the most awareness to, I guess, around the end of this month when we get our second one. That doesn't sound as specific as I would like it to be.
No.
But
I I'm struggling with this. I don't know, like, I was especially delineating Saturn retrograde, like, what to do with it.
Mhm,
Um, I still have I kinda struggled delineating that, like, I just keep thinking of this example of a client who was I thought it was really poetic, just as Saturn was retrograding, they're
mhm.
going to be and they didn't time this, like, revisiting a place they might wanna move back to, and I was like,
Yeah,
"Oh," in their 4th it's in their 4th house, and I
okay.
was like, "Oh, well, that's cool timing."
And it's angular for
Like,
them.
they're like, "Should I? Shouldn't I?" I'm like, "I don't know, how's it feel to you?" It's not one of those things where it's like Mercury retrograde and, like, maybe sleep on it, I'm just like, "I don't know, it feels like, it" if that's what you wanna do. Does that make sense? And I
It
I know
does.
you're gonna have more of a thoughts on
You know,
this.
I have 2 thoughts on this that you've inspired. One of them is the thing I pay attention most to in Saturn's retrograde cycle is the
Yeah,
station and the
yeah,
station, so the station retrograde and the station direct. Those seem to be the most active points, right? You could say curtailed passage might have something because it's Saturn switching phase. I don't have any hard memories of that being like oh, Saturn's at curtailed passage, this happened. And we also want to
yeah,
make sure that we're understanding Saturn is a social planet. You know, it is something that's happening more in our headlines, perhaps, than in our personal lives, especially if Saturn isn't activated by perfection or something like that.
mhm,
And if Saturn isn't angular in the chart. And that regardless, Saturn is going to, for a native, do what Saturn promises to do in the natal chart. So you always have to think like, I would say, should I, shouldn't I? What does Saturn in your chart say? And how does that relate to now,
mhm.
but I also think that with Saturn, the second thought here is that's a very isolated decision. I don't think Saturn wants people butting into someone else's business when it would come to the movement. So I think your choice to be like, I don't know, is actually what Saturn would have had you tell this person. It's your choice. It's something you have to make for yourself, and without necessarily, you can do research and stuff, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't take other people's opinion into consideration.
And this is always brings up a thing I struggle with in readings, and I wonder if you do too. I absolutely believe in predictive astrology, and that's a whole I
Mhm.
say this 'cause that's a whole conversation because I think some people do it better than others, like the level of.
Yeah.
So I really think that we can look to a chart and go, "Okay, this might be a good time for X, Y, or Z." But I do struggle with actually telling people things like beware of X, or don't do this, or do this, or they're like, what should I do? And I'm like, I don't, that's not my job. Like, I
Mhm.
know it's a struggle, because I think so often people come to astrologers because they're like, well, I just want you to tell me what to do. And I don't think that's my job. And I want your thoughts on this. And then we've
Yeah.
mentioned this before, had this conversation before in
Well, yeah, and
versions of.
especially since predictive astrology today is maybe not necessarily what it was first drawn out as in ancient times. One of the things that we learned from Demetra's um, workshop a couple weeks ago was how transits are the very last thing that you should take into consideration if daily transits matter at all, because you want to focus on the solar return kind of stuff
Yeah.
and other timing techniques to activate
Mhm.
things like zodiacal releasing or circumambulations or whatever. But I have, and one of the people I've done this with, hi Angela, I have done this thing where I'll be given a date and someone will say, what can I expect around this date? So I'll look at that date in relation to their chart, in
Okay.
relation to their solar return, and just consider it like a poignant event and say, what of the solar return or what of their natal promise, where is this happening? Where is, if there's like, a Mars aspect, where is that Mars aspect hitting their charts? Is it something that they need to pay attention to? In the case of Angela, there was stuff happening in the 12th house, which would normally have me thinking like, okay, there's probably nothing noticeable here. But since it was more than one person that was going to be dealing with the situation, I was like, just be aware of things that may not be something that you anticipated and something you would have thought to prepare for. It's probably going to be someone else's mistake or something like that that you then have to react to. And it did actually kind of work out and seemed helpful that day. So I
Mhm.
always do it in relation to the natal chart, in relation to whatever, if there, especially if there's a specific date. If there's not a specific date, I'll say like, when are you likely to have a decision? And I'll look at your timing and say, we know it started here, we know it finishes here. In the meantime, what can you do to feel comfortable while you wait? um
Yeah, and I love that level of specificity. Like,
Whoop, lost your
I can't.
camera.
Oh God, what is okay? Literally nothing moved. Okay, hold on one moment here. This is cute.
I will remember what you were saying, I promise.
Oh Lord. Ugh. Oh.
So do we have anybody you
Oh,
can
it doesn't matter. Why I'm like, I can keep talking. It doesn't matter if my
I would
camera's
say we
frozen.
can, well, we can also take questions now too.
We can.
There we go. Hi there.
Oh, it's a different camera.
It works. Different camera, you still look good.
Thank you. Um, let's see. Oh, sorry. I like the level. Now I'm like all distracted by my like lack of camera. We're just gonna go with this shitty camera. It's cool. Um, I like the level of specificity in that, because you're actually looking at a date, and I'll just wait till the camera comes back.
I was
You're
gonna say,
actually looking at a date and like reacting to that. But what I heard in your response was, you're not telling someone what they should or shouldn't do. You're like,
mhm,
oh, on this date, this is the energy. Look out for these kind of things. But you're not like telling you're not telling someone, I think you should X, Y, or Z. That
no.
makes sense. And I think that that's like the really important distinction of what you said, is oftentimes I think people come seeking direct answers, and a lot of times astrology can point you in the direction, but you have to do the like hard thinking yourself.
Yeah, and that's where counseling skills and coaching skills really come into play, because what you can do is not say, "Here's what you should do," but you can say, knowing what you know, what are you drawn toward? What do you actually
Mhm.
want? There's some part of the person that kind of has an idea of at least how to get to their next step, and you don't want to do it for them. You want them to decide for themselves so that they don't have to question later whether they made the right choice. I think the journey is what gives you the confidence in the decision. So I'm happy to walk alongside someone on a journey, but I'm not going to, throw them or catapult them to the destination, because I think that that would be cheating them in a certain sense of their process. When it comes to like storybook characters, I always decided I'm like, I can be the main character on occasion, but I really want to be either the plucky sidekick or the mentor character. Those are my favorites.
Just in general, like in your personal life.
Yes.
I love it. By the way, can you hear me clearly? I'm just going to go with the fact that
Yeah, your sound is perfect. No worries on
my
that.
my camera's a jerk, and we're going to live with that. Hello everyone from the void. Um, this also, can we do we have any questions before I just like ramble on with questions for you?
My chat is crickets at the moment, unless someone would like to chime in. And the comments here in StreamYard seem to be pretty slow as well. So I think we've covered everything.
Okay, great. I had an not incident this weekend, but I kind of want to talk to you about maybe moving away from just astrology to divination.
Yes.
I had I have a friend of mine who's wonderful, and I sometimes I have a couple people in my life like this where if I need something, I'll just text them, be like, "Hey, will you pull a card for me?" Or will you give me a message?
Mhm.
And I was trying to decide if I should do a thing. And I was feeling really overwhelmed, like, I don't have time to do the thing, and so I texted my friend, and I was like, "I don't know if I should do this thing, will you pull a card?" And they pulled a card, and their message was, "It feels like maybe you shouldn't go because you have too much on your mind right now, like, too much going on." And but it was interesting because the way that I interpreted that message was, and I don't need to give you the backstory of what else, but, like,
Mhm.
I had been coming to some conclusions in my life that I just actually do too much, and I'm actually really, like, feeling burnt out and overwhelmed, and so
Mhm.
when I heard, like, "Well, actually, you shouldn't go because you have too much on your mind," because my plan B was just to, like, stay in and work all weekend and probably not get anything done because I would get burnt out. So I
Mhm.
took their responses, "Actually, feels like a trick question. I've already committed to this thing, and I think that I need to go precisely because I have too much going on." So,
Yeah.
like, I didn't take the divination, like, straightforward, but I interpreted it based on my own, like, response,
Mhm.
and I've been, like, really sitting with that because I'm a person who really likes to, like, listen to the oracle, and I was like, "Wow," like, I'm kind of, like, breaking my rules to listen to my own oracle, and I would just love your thoughts on that.
So I have so many thoughts on this. As someone who channels energies, and has kind of used that to guide myself through my life in most
Yeah.
cases, they will be misleading on purpose to get you to make a decision. I've had a lot of situations with clients and with myself where you'll get this prognostication or this divination, and you're like, "This is what's going to happen," and and it's not what ends up happening. But because you were moving towards it, you noticed something else that you had tunnel vision from before, and so
Mm,
because they gave you this thing that you could conceive of to make sense of, to move towards, or to react to, then you got to make this insightful or intuitive decision on your own terms for a different reason. You got to actively say no, which is just as powerful as saying yes. So I do think that sometimes the divination will give you what you need, but not always what you thought you wanted to hear or what you thought you needed. It'll motivate you. It kind of coaches you into making the decision for yourself. Especially, it's kind of like a horary chart. If you ask a question too many times, you'll almost see the chart start mocking you. And I know
yeah.
people have said cards do this as well, where if you ask the same question too many times, it's like the diamonds or the energies or the spirits of that are motivating you, or just like, you already know the answer and you're abusing your connection to us, so we're just going to mock you. And I've seen that happen on occasion. I've been the person who's done that. So not the mocking, but been on the receiving end. And I think that it comes down to what you need to do, you will find out how to do. And you might get there smoothly, or you might get there through a couple bumps.
Ooh, okay, so just to, like, go back in my particular incident to put it through the
Mhm.
gorgeousness that you just described, or eloquence, I don't know,
Thanks.
gorgeous, that too. Um, so in this case, I committed to something, and I was having reservations, and I kinda knew, I was like, "I don't know," and I asked the oracle, and the oracle, being my friend, came back with, I thought it was interesting, it was like the 10 of pentacles, which
Mm,
to me speaks to, like, material stuff, and their
yeah.
response was, because I asked, "Should I go?" Which never asked that to a tarot reader, by the way.
Right.
Like, I first did my okay, and their response was, "It looks like you have too much going on." And that sentence to me, does that make sense? So they
Mhm.
said no, but I interpreted that as a yes because I was like, "Oh, I precisely need to go because I have too much going on." Does
Yeah.
that make sense? So in a
Yeah.
sense, so if I'm understanding what you're hearing right, like, sometimes the oracle will, like, give us an answer that pushes us where we need to go, even if it means, like, on the surface, going against the oracle.
Sometimes the oracle will trigger your demand avoidance. Yeah. It'll be like, do it. You won't. And then you'll be like, you know what? Because you told me to, I'm not gonna. And that's the choice that you were supposed to make.
Yeah. You know, in this case, it wasn't really like being like obstinate. It was being like,
Yeah.
what it was making me think of is like how, I don't know, like if you read the Bible or I don't know, like Greek mythology, it's always
Yeah.
like the oracle always speaks in these riddles, right? So there was never a yes, no, as far as I don't know, all the like mythology I've read. It's usually just like, and look for the heart-shaped cow or something. And you're
Yeah.
like, the fuck does that mean? Right. Like the oracle is like kind of puts you through having to like do some work. And that's why I think when I had that, I was like, oh, this is a riddle. Like it's more
Mhm.
complex than yes or no.
It always is. I mean, like I was, and hello to Steph Draws. I'm glad that you finally made the broadcast and that you're learning stuff. I was in Italy,
Yeah.
and I landed in Italy, and immediately, like I had a bad feeling to begin with, and I was cranky because I couldn't sleep. And all of a sudden, we find out we thought we were supposed to have had a hotel scheduled, and it wasn't. And then we weren't sure we were going to get it. And then, like, we had to go throughout Rome all day because we couldn't get a room until like 6 that night in like yesterday's clothes, and just not feeling our best, and feeling kind of tussled. And I remember walking around Rome venting with Dan about like, well, what's the point of this? Like, you ask God for a sign, I'll ask God for a sign. I need to figure out what the point of this is. And then later, in that moment, I was not satisfied. I wanted the answer now. I did not get it. But later, I realized that in talking to the trip people and in talking to my business partner, I had already forgotten that the next trip also needed an extra hotel night. So because of this, I now was able to plan for a future thing that I would not have known about. It would have happened again. And so I ended up stumbling over a ton of things because something I had forgotten. And this was like the best way to remind me, I guess. But it also ended up with us getting like a fully renovated room for 2 nights that had extra perks to it, like an extra breakfast that had the best food of the entire trip from my experience, except for one day, which is on my birthday, which was great. Um, but it really set me up to be prepared for also the rest of the trip. There were challenges that we faced in the rest of the trip that I had to be kind of like in a state of mind to stand up for myself and not be too pliable when it came to someone else trying to be pushy.
Yeah.
And because I ended up being a little bit cranky to start the trip, I stood up for myself and for other people, which was something that I needed to be prepared for, even though it wasn't an enjoyable experience at first. I think it worked out.
Ooh, did you ever get the signs you were looking for?
I did, yeah, and now I have a really great, so we're going to Japan at the end of this month, and that was
Yeah.
the one that also needed an extra night. So now I have all of Japan, like the things that weren't already scheduled, they're booked. And of course it's Japan, right? So you can do things, you can reserve things like a month out. I don't have to worry about anything. That's why Japan is one of my favorite places. They're so organized. The systems there are just very fine-tuned. So I look forward to being there because I feel like my stress levels will go down because other people are also very on top of their stuff.
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's such a good story. And I think it ties in too, right? Like thinking about, okay, I'm trying to make this work with this new moon, right? So we're talking about maybe this isn't the moment to like manifest, but it is a moment to like kind of recap. Um, what would you say? Lessen evil in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was, that was how Valens put it. Like, how did he say it? Hang on, I wanna bring up the exact quote because he's quite eloquent himself, that Valens. Um, so he's saying, I offer this advice to my readers, not with the idea that it is possible to appeal to the decrees of fate and to act according to one's wishes. So you can't do what you want, but with the suggestion that it is possible, I would certainly claim it to be so, for the initiates of this art to weaken the evil to some extent.
Mm.
Just by saying what he says later, TLDR, just saying, you can't get me mad. I already know you're doing it. Like, I've decided I'm not going to be mad. Don't let the
Speaking of
noise
riddles,
you.
right? Like, I don't know. How do you lessen evil? Wait, no, what's the word again? What's the phrase again? I keep
Weaken the evil to
saying
some
weaken
extent.
evil, right? Like
Mhm.
that's up to you to interpret.
Yeah, yeah. How are you going to bear the bad with great steadfastness? instead of being reactive, I suppose.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah. Some things which must be guarded against are foreknown because of the conjunctions and the aspects with benefics. Nevertheless, even if a benefic is able to do something, a malefic in conjunction or aspect will hinder the good.
I've been reading more like ancient texts lately. Like I've been reading like Firmicus and like Valens,
Mhm.
and sometimes I'm like, oh, my head hurts.
I know. I know.
Like I feel like there should be like a warning, like maybe only so it can get pretty dark, which is why I like talking to you because I think you can kind of like avoid the fatalistic in general. Like you just have this really magical way of like graceful way of taking this really rough text and just being like, but okay, here's some like motivational speech to take from this that just feels really good.
Yeah, I just feel like they were writing for the extreme, and we're not always living in the extreme. So there is a way that you can dial it back and say for the common average day, here's what you can do. And even if you are going through something hard, being in the hard is so much easier than being afraid of the hard arriving. So I don't know. I also have a chart that shows I live the hard frequently.
Yeah.
So I feel like because I've been able to adjust to it, I can help people.
I really love that. Is somebody who openly has terrible anxiety and I can literally scare myself, and I do on a way too regular basis. Um,
Love it.
I love that idea that like anticipating the hard is so much more
It's so much worse.
worse than being in the hard. And
Yeah.
I think that that's something we should all remember when we think about these more difficult like astrology techniques.
Yeah. Yeah, because like, I mean, I don't know if this is something that's relatable to everybody, but I've been in situations where I've had to perform CPR or I've had to call 911 or I've had to sit with someone as they passed away, or I've been in a lot of pain, or I've had to deal with like, good night for the next 10 hours. Hopefully you wake up at the other end of this. And it's like when you get to that moment, I remember the good night for the next 10 hours was a brain surgery. And I just took a breath and I, as a 10-year-old, said to mom and dad, like, you know what? I'm ready. Let's just do it. If it's going to be what it's going to be. At that point, you either have everything you need or something else comes up and you get creative in the moment. But like you're always ready to handle the moment, whatever it brings, as ready as you're supposed to be. So being afraid of it is the worst part to me. Dreading something is more agonizing than actually being in the hard moment. And so I figure if instead of dreading, I can prepare, because I was raised with the Boy Scouts, I can prepare things and say, you know what, if that's what I'm afraid it's going to be, how can I set myself up with resources and things to make it not that bad? And I think Valens seems to agree with that and says we can use astrology to figure it out.
I love that quote. First, well, I love the Valens quote where he says, "This is why." Can you go back to that? Do you know what I'm talking about? Where he's like, especially, this is why we do astrology. I thought that
Yeah.
was so beautiful.
Um, so let's see. Is it the one? I offer this advice to my readers, not with the idea that it is possible to appeal to the decrees of fate and to act according to one's wishes, but with the suggestion that it is possible, I would certainly claim it to be so, for the initiates of this art to weaken the evil to some extent. For God, in his desire that man should foreknow the future, brought this science into the world, a science through which anyone can know his fate in order to bear the good with great contentment and the bad with great steadfastness.
Ah, it's so good. What page is that, by the way? Is that the
Oh, I know it's book 5. Um, I can probably pull it up really quick.
yeah. And also
Even
just
if I
like,
read my balance, there's like notes everywhere.
I mean, can I just ask a question? I mean, that must have been wow. You've talked about this before, but you were 10 years old and you had to when you had your first brain operation.
Yeah. Yep.
Do you think that was your first lesson in starting to understand fear? I mean, that feels like a big one.
Um, By the way, Valen spends a lot of book 5 getting into theory and talking about how astrology helps people in their lives. So I highly recommend like all of it.
Okay.
Can you ask me that question again? Because I was distracted.
Yeah. I'll wait till you're done.
Because I think it's right at the beginning. Yeah. So it's on page 196 of the Riley translation of
Okay.
Valen. I have it highlighted, those lines in particular for the obvious reasons.
Hi, Steph. Steph draws. Steph draws.
2.0.
Yeah.
The
Thank you
new
for
version.
joining us. Yeah. Okay. My question was, I mean, it's something. Wow, you had your first brain surgery at 10 years old. Like,
Mhm.
how? I mean, I mean, it sort of sounds so simple to say, like, how did that change your life? But like, really, do you think it's shaped the way that you view the world?
It changed truly, literally everything. The surgery did happen on a day where the Saturn Jupiter conjunction in Taurus was aspecting my sun and my descendant, and my Time Lord of the Year Mercury was conjunct Jupiter on the sun. And like you can look at that and say, "Wow, something poignant happened to this person." Um, but what happened to me wasn't just that it was a brain surgery. I think I would have just moved on from that had I had the brain surgery and survived and whatever. But it was that before that, this random woman came out of the church congregation and started teaching me energy healing. And then on that
Mhm.
day, when I died during surgery, she on an airplane somewhere got a random hit that Krista needs energy, wrote down the time, and then sent me energy. And that's when I came back to life unassisted by the doctors. And the doctors just happened to mention the time to my parents so that they could correlate it. So when I got all of this data saying, hey, you died, but you came back by magic, I was like, okay, well, now I know what I have to do with my life. I have to figure out how this works and do it for other people. And that changed literally everything.
Wow, that was 10 years old.
Yeah, it was 2 weeks after my birthday.
Wow. I hope you don't mind. I'm just like talking about your personal life.
Oh no,
I'm so
it's a
fascinated
good
though, because
story.
like, I think sometimes it's easy to get lost in the weeds of astrology if we just look at these texts and just like take them. But I think why I appreciate you so much as an astrologer is because you've really like lived through the difficulty. And when you speak to people, you're coming from a place of like knowledge and that you can truly say, yeah, like the fear is worse.
Yeah, I'm getting some comments over
Okay. Yeah.
on Instagram. Salt and Stem says this reminds me of Saturn transits, the mindset that whatever Saturn brings is a strong teacher, which helps adaptability a ton. Agreed. And Katie enjoyed the story. I'm really glad. So
Aw.
yeah, it was, it's a big motivating factor for me. I remember when I got into astrology, I expected, much like Ficino, expected to have Pisces Venus exalted and all this glorious stuff, and then was really disappointed in his Aquarius Saturn rising. Um, I expected to have like this really charmed life chart because I've gotten a lot accomplished. And in fact, I got a chart that even our mentor was just like, "Are you okay? Like, have you been through some stuff?" And I study it and I study it and I'm like, wow, this is the chart of someone who's been through some stuff. And it's like that qualifies me to be helpful. Um, and I that's my goal. Like I can go through a situation, find out how to make the most of it, and help someone not have to go through as long of a situation if possible. Um, and then, so funny story that we can wrap up on here. I, of course, live with the thing that I got surgery for still today. It's what is it? It's a disease that continues to get bad, but mine has gone as bad as it can. And so it's one of those things where the doctor said every day is a good day until it's not. Every minute's a good minute until it's not. And so that's like really motivating for me. But then during the Demetra thing, I accidentally happened upon an indicator in my chart that would show when you're going to die, like a very common indicator of the end of life. And I even showed it to Larry, and it was like, if this is true, I get to make it until I'm 70, which is pretty epic when you think about the current time. They're like at best 40. And so like I get 30 more years than people are pinning on me right now. And then we got back from Denver and I went out to a cafe with Dan and I was sitting at a table and right behind me, like on the seat that I almost sat in, a
Yeah.
lamp fell from the ceiling and crashed onto the seat. The person who was running the the cash register at the time ran out and said, "You would have died." And I was just like, "Yeah, but not yet." Like, I already know, and it's not today. So that was my funny story. That's a little bit of morbid humor, but hopefully it was.
That's really beautiful. And can I just like end on something there?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like that's really gorgeous, but also like warning to people, I wouldn't go home and try to like look up your length of life
No,
technique.
I won't do that for anybody else. It was an accident for myself.
Because many people you've been trying to uncover it and people have been like, no.
Yeah, people wouldn't tell me how to do it. I wanted to do it on myself, testing people that I have known for their full life. And for Katie, I have assisted people in their transitions before. Yes. I have taken, like, I was with my grandmother more energetically. That's a whole other story, and we don't have a ton of time for it today. But there's a podcast episode about it, um, where I have been involved in multiple people's processes of passing. It's an honor, honestly. It's one of the most amazing things I've been able to be a part of for 4 or 5 people at this point. Um, I just end up in those places. I am not a trained death doula. I just happen to be there when people are passing, and I have a natural ability to hopefully hold space for that. So
Death follows you on that.
death follows me, and we're friends, so it's fine.
On that note,
Yeah.
may we all enjoy a
Day.
beautiful moon day.
Yeah. So, long story short, everybody, it's not exactly a manifesting Cancerian new moon this week, but it is one to recognize the support systems you already have in place. So, I hope that you find those easily and that they are abundant for you.
Lovely. And we'll both be back next Monday and
Yeah.
hopefully I have a working camera. Lord knows
Yeah.
what happened. So have a gorgeous day.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.